Hey, Bitsy Loo Hoo, how are you? I got the hiccups. And I only been drinking water. The water gave me the hiccups. Seems like I got hiccups about this time last night, too. I'm trying to set this up easier to read and not be in my way. Hey, Miss Early. Did you bring your hot flash kit? You might need it tonight. Dang it, now the yawning's gonna start. My body is trying to make me pee on myself. Well, Miss Early, you're gonna need it tonight. Because this is supposed to be, it's taking us back to school and getting hot and sexy with the teachers. Whoop, whoop. Miss Shirley, did you ever have a crush on a teacher? I remember in 8th grade, I had a teacher who was really good looking. But he was really a dork. Even to this day, I think about it, and he really was a dork. And then high school, can't think of anybody. Maybe coaches or something like childhood. But in college, there was a few teachers I had to like. One in particular, he was from Colombia. No, he was from Dominican Republic. Dominican. And hey Ori, and he was pretty much a dirty old man. Girl, look at you. But a student teacher's a little different, and you were a freshman in college. My gosh, you were like the same age. Nina Beaner is our teacher. Is our author going to be here tonight? Well, I saw something about Australia. Is she from Australia? Okay. When you said naughty, crack me up. So I'm babysitting this afternoon, and I have 2 screens. And on one screen I have my work. On the other screen, I have our chat going, and we call ourselves, or Nina calls us, the naughty crazy PAs. She actually read naughty crazy PAs out loud. I was like, oh shit. I had to kind of make that up a little bit. And then when we got outside, talked to her mama was dropping F bombs like crazy, and I was like, "Well, shit." Nope. Fiddle me diddle. Can't see. That's part of the problem. Alrighty. I'm going to assume she is not on this side of the pond because several stuff is in other languages that I don't even speak or recognize. Hey, Jackie. Hey, Jackie. Get your little black toy out. You're gonna need it tonight. Got my phone handy. What do I need my phone for? All right, y'all ready? I'm gonna go ahead and get started. It's called Erotic Teacher, Erotica for Women, and I have no idea what this is going to be like. Okay, no clue. So we're just going to start. I don't know if there's going to be a lot of talking or not. So just sit back and enjoy. I loved being a teacher. I loved teaching. Going to school every day, imparting knowledge was one of the things I most enjoyed doing. I had years of experience in that school, and I was starting a new school year. I would be teaching literature for the last few years, older kids, maybe bigger problems, but I was excited. I enjoyed teaching. Literature was a class that some found complicated in my hands because I like to analyze the great classics in detail. However, I did not agree. I believe that this was the best way to learn and the best way to initiate young people into reading. Many thought it had the opposite effect. I didn't think so. I was immersed at the moment in the books, in the reading, in the words. It was my favorite world where I like to be. I had my first class of the day and I went without delay to the classroom where the class would take place. I was always the first one there. Punctuality was of paramount importance to me. I completely rejected tardiness. It was the kind of thing that made students lose points. Since it was the first day of school, I felt fresh, revitalized, and ready to take action. That day, I wore a long, tight skirt that reached my knees and a blouse with slight cleavage. My figure was beautiful, even though I wasn't that young anymore. Maybe because I hadn't had children yet. My face was harmonious, big brown eyes, long hair of the same color that I picked up when I went to teach in a long hair of the same color that I picked up when I went to teach in a long ponytail, and an ass that stole looks wherever I went. The students were often distracted, and that particular year would be even worse. Older boys. When the students entered the classroom, I was already there going over some last minute details for that day's class. The girls only saw me once. However, the boys kept turning their heads in my direction. I pretended not to notice or even to smile. I had to earn everyone's respect from day one, and so the class began. I was ready to make a good first impression. Since it was the first day, there were only introductions, and I wanted to know the level that those seniors had. Some didn't know many of the writers I named, but most did. It was a great relief. I fired them by asking them to read the book assigned for the next class. The bell rang announcing lunch, and that's when I noticed a boy I hadn't seen until he got up and started packing his things. He looked older for his age. Maybe he was exercising because his body was muscular. He looked very manly. His eyes were spectacular. After a while, I realized that I had been watching him for several seconds, and I looked down immediately to see my hands entwined. He was a handsome boy. There was no doubt about it. I would know his name in the next class and also his acting skills. Suddenly, one of his classmates shouted, "It would be great if we could if you'd hurry up. If you'd hurry up, Wolf," in his direction, and so I knew the boy's nickname. Although I didn't know the reason for this peculiar nickname, I suspected it was because of his eyes. What other student has shouted made me what that other student has shouted made me think. Had the boy called Wolf been deliberately delaying? I was always the last one to leave. I thought for a moment and then played it down. I shouldn't be thinking that way at all. I shook my head, trying to put those thoughts away, packed up my things, ready to have left ready to have lunch because I had noticed that I was starving. During lunch, I thought about the student. I didn't know exactly why my thoughts turned to him, but they did. I ate, and almost without realizing it was time for the next class, I was very distracted. I had been sitting there doing nothing but thinking. I had to wake up. So first I went to the bathroom, and then I went straight to the classroom for the next class that was due to me that first day. When I got home, I was still distracted. My husband hadn't arrived yet. I remembered that I was ovulating and that we would try one more time. My husband and I had been trying to have a child. However, every effort had been unsuccessful. I was beginning to think that I could not get pregnant. I felt that the problem lay with me, not with him. I was still hoping that this reality would change, but so far it had not. Every month we tried, and every month I was disappointed. I wasn't sure how long I could keep it up. While waiting for my husband, I sat on the living room couch to try to relax by watching a little TV. However, my thoughts continued to ramble. It was ridiculous. Why did I think about it so much? I tried to think about something else, and I succeeded for a few minutes. The next day, I might see him again. I arrived at the school for half an hour before I was supposed to be there. It was a habit that I had not been able to break. I felt it was the best thing, as I had said. I didn't like being late. That day's class was to take place in a somewhat secluded room, and I headed in that direction when, without warning, on the way, I heard a group of students talking about what seemed like a very funny thing. Every so often, they were all laughing like fools. I heard one of them tell a story, and the others listened intently and they laughed. "He's a beast, girls. He's always the one who has to command." I felt so. Okay, hold on. I thought that was guys. Did I not say guys? Just a group of students. "He's a beast, girls. He's always the one who has to command." I felt so helpless. I think it turns me on more that way. That was the moment when that was the moment when everyone was laughing. I recognized the girl for one of the students in the class the day before. "What did you say her name was?" one of them asked when she stopped laughing for a second. "Everyone calls him Wolf. His name is," and someone interrupted her, and so I couldn't find out his name. And that's how I found out that this boy has had the reputation of being a beast in bed, which didn't contribute to my inappropriate thoughts. I didn't stop thinking about it for the whole class. It wasn't like me to be distracted while working, but it was inevitable. That boy was very popular in school, and with that reputation that student was giving him, mm, I wouldn't be surprised if tomorrow he had a lot of girls swarming around him. I surprised myself by waiting impatiently for that next class where the boy they called Wolf would be. What was happening to me? That was not good at all. It was one thing to pretend that my students didn't see me and walk around the school as if nothing had happened, but it was quite another to find myself waiting to see one of them. No, that wasn't right at all. Besides, I was a married woman trying to have a baby with my husband. I spent the whole day in a constant diatribe with my mind, but it was no use. My thoughts did not obey me. The next week, I arrived at school nervous. My hands were shaking a lot, and I unconsciously got dressed up more than usual. I entered the classroom earlier than usual and waited until everyone was seated and silent. Wolf had entered the room last with an air of smugness. I didn't know if they were my ideas or if the boy was really that way. I started the class with everything, asking questions about the book that I had sent out to be read the week before. Some answered, some claimed to have forgotten about it, others they didn't know there was homework. The usual excuses. Without wasting any more time, I noticed the name of the boy sitting at the back of the room. His name was Antonio. Yes, I finally knew his name. He was looking straight ahead with an itchy smile on his lips, looking at me from head to toe without a hint. For some reason, this didn't bother me in the least. If I were to be honest, I was much more nervous. A smile was threatening to appear on my face, but I held it back and I adopted the most serious expression I could. I asked Antonio the following question directly. He smiled more openly and stood up to answer. His answer was perfect. The boy was overflowing with charm, sympathy. He seemed very masculine. As I had already mentioned, he appeared to be much older. I noticed that most of the students saw him and sighed. He was a real stud. I controlled myself so as not to laugh like a fool and tell him I was right, and instead I told him I had done well. I got very serious with my lips pressed in a straight line so as not to smile. All the classes I taught in the room were where Antonio was. I taught with my heart beating all the time, and he was smiling in the back of the room with unparalleled sympathy. He spoke to his classmates, smiling and joking. I knew it was wrong. I knew nothing could happen, but I couldn't help but let my imagination run wild. One day, I stayed in a classroom longer than I needed to start grading papers. Because I didn't like doing it at home and in the teacher's lounge, I was too distracted. I was much focused, and suddenly I felt footsteps coming down the hall. I wasn't very surprised because the classes were about to end. There was no one around except for some teachers who were doing the same thing as me. I raised my head from the test I was correcting, and Antonio was smiling at me from the doorway. I'm sorry to interrupt you, teacher, but I wanted to know if you had finished correcting my test. It seemed like a bad excuse, but I went along with it. In fact, no, but I could do it after I corrected this one if you wish. My voice came out more suggestive than I had intended. Antonio was good in literature. I corrected his exam right away, and then we discussed different books that, in my opinion, were a work of art. He came closer to me every second that passed, and I could not get away from him, secretly wishing he would bring his muscular body closer to mine. I could not control my body language. He would notice, I was sure. We were sitting at desk, and I got up and stood on the desk in front of him. Antonio did the same thing and sat next to me, brushing my arms as he did so. I knew there was no turning back. He turned his head and kissed me ardently. I couldn't say that I was surprised. I reciprocated by kissing him, taking my hands to the back of his head to support me and kiss him as fiercely as possible. His strong arms grabbed me by the waist and set me down on the desk while sliding his hands all over my body, drawing me closer to him. I wrapped my legs around him as best I could while he kissed my neck. He went down to my breast, which he pulled out of my bra with his rustic hands to bring them to his mouth one by one, licking my nipples. On the other hand, he caressed my other nipple, not without filling it with saliva. I threw my head back, lost in the moment. I wasn't thinking, just feeling. His mouth went a long way from my breast to my abdomen. He pulled back my blouse and pulled my skirt up to my waist for greater access. He knew what he was doing. He knew very well. My panties went to the floor and he sank his head between my legs, licking my clitoris, gently giving me quick laps. Then he stuck two fingers in my pussy and he started moving them so fast that I thought I would lose my mind. It was hard to remember where I was and that I couldn't make too much of a fuss. I forgot for a moment and my moans filled the classroom. Antonio was licking my inner thighs, my clitoris, while moving his fingers inside my pussy faster and faster. I put both hands on his head and drew him closer to me, moving my hips toward his mouth. He stopped me and continued to lick until I felt an orgasm coming. But Antonio parted my pussy to pull down his pants and reveal erect cocks and that I immediately wanted to bring to my mouth. But he had other plans. He instructed me to lie down, climb on top of me, and penetrated me while holding my hands so I wouldn't have too much mobility. He rammed me with all of his strength on the desk, moving at breakneck speed, letting his pelvis fall hard on my clitoris. A hitherto unknown pleasure, he invaded me. I could not move my arms. He held them tightly while he violently possessed me and licked my neck and breast. I had my legs on each side, and he penetrated me with rudeness and unusual hardness without letting go. I felt helpless, possessed by this boy who was already a very virile man. His scent came to me with total clarity and excited me even more. He increased his movements to the point that he made me scream with pleasure without caring that someone to see came to see what was happening. He didn't let me move at all. He was the one in charge at the moment. When he squeezed my arms a lot more, I knew he would come, but he didn't. He ordered me to get off the desk, and he did so in turn. He took me by one arm and turned me around so that I was bent over the desk with my butt in the air. He grabbed my head tightly and forced me to turn my cheek against the desk. He held my head very tightly against the desk that the whole time he fucked me without looking. His pelvis was bumping into my buttocks, producing a lot of noise. Added to that was the fact that he was spanking me to leave my buttocks raw. I was screaming, and the more I did, the more violently he charged at me till the orgasm took over my body and I came while he kept penetrating me and spanking me. He withdrew from me to come on my lower back, as in doing so, I almost collapsed on the floor as my legs failed me. After that, we had sex all the time. We didn't miss any opportunities. In the teachers' rooms, in the classrooms, in the gym, anywhere was a good place for Antonio. Yes, he was a sexual beast who liked to dominate. He wanted to use handcuffs or ties. Seriously? Come on. He just closed on me. He wanted to use handcuffs or ties, and I was willing to please him. I was sure of that. And so I did. Outside the school, we met one afternoon when I called in sick. My husband hadn't heard. No one at school knew either, and we could meet on the sly. Once in the room, Antonio ordered me to lie down with my legs wide open on the bed, and I obeyed him without a word. He tied me up, and I was left with my legs and arms stretched out in an almost painful way, and Antonio proceeded to kiss me all over my body. I could do nothing. I was vulnerable, and that's how I felt. For some reason, that made everything more interesting and pleasant. Antonio pinched my nipples, and I let out a scream, but he continued to do so until I started to like it. He kissed my breast, my pussy, my abdomen as he went up to be completely on top of me, and so he possessed me, moving as fast as he could inside me. I couldn't touch it. I couldn't move. Antonio continued to charge violently, grabbing my breast, kissing my mouth, licking my face a little. I was very exciting. We both let ourselves go and came almost at the same time, I dare say. Antonio couldn't leave in time. I was ecstatic. He fell on my chest, sweating and breathing heavily. I wanted to be untied to caress him. The months went by, and as time went by, I felt worse and worse. Not only did I feel guilty, but I also felt bad physically. So I was forced to make an appointment with the doctor. While I was there in the waiting room, my nerves were increasing. It couldn't be what I was thinking. Oh no, it was not possible. I had tried with my husband and nothing had happened. So I didn't give it much thought when Antonio couldn't leave in time. What I what would I do if he turned out that my suspicions were not unfounded? I tried to calm down and I didn't succeed. When I was given the results, I had mixed feelings. On the one hand, it was what I had always wanted. On the other hand, it wasn't with my husband. I closed my eyes tightly, trying to find a solution. I sat there for what seemed like an endless time, and I knew what I had to do. No one would have to know. I had to end my relationship with Antonio as soon as possible. When I told him, he seemed sad but not surprised. I imagined he had expected something like this at any moment. He understood that I was a married woman. He knew that from the beginning. I thanked him for his understanding. All that remained was for me to talk to my husband and give him what would be the best news for him. That afternoon, I arrived home more nervous than ever. I knew there was nothing else to do. No one would know. It was meant to be. When my husband came home, I gave him the news. I was pregnant. He would finally have a child. My husband was happy. I promised myself that I would never reveal the truth to anyone, and my husband and I celebrated the news that night. All right, that was the end of that story. Looks like I got time for one more. Oh, this is part 2. Erotic Teacher, Erotica for Women 2. The book that I got it's off KU, and it's actually 1 through 5. So, as my pregnancy progressed, I struggled between the urge to tell Antonio the truth and wanting to hide the fact that my baby was not my husband's but his. I had told everyone that the baby was my husband's and that we were happy because we had been trying for a while and it was finally coming true. I saw Antonio every day at school. He was watching me carefully, in my opinion, hoping that I would make some kind of gesture to tell on him, or and talk to him. He would smile at me directly, and I would look away, unable to hold his insistent gaze. My belly swelled more with each passing day, yet it was still barely noticeable. My pregnancy was just beginning, and Antonio still had no idea that he was the father of my child. However, something told me that he suspected it. It didn't seem that my pregnancy bothered him at all. In class, he kept seeing me and trying to be the one to answer all my questions. His grades were perfect, and much to my regret, Antonio the wolf was even more handsome than he had ever been. On more than one occasion, he caught me watching him closely from my desk. I couldn't go on like that anymore. I felt so much guilt. And on top of all that, he was 21 and I was 38. He was still in school because his father, who traveled a lot, had educated him very late. However, Antonio was still interested in me, looking for any excuse to be the last one to leave the classroom. He would cross paths with me, apparently by mere chance, saying very close to my ear, "I'm sorry," with a tone of voice charged with sensuality. I had no choice but to tell him that it was all right, most timidly. I felt very anxious when I saw him. He was so sensual, his muscular body, his attitude, his intelligence, all of which threatened to make me succumb once again. Yet I had not fallen into his nets again. I had been able to control myself, but for how much longer? It was not easy for me. I felt that the will would fail me at some point. Having him so close did not help. Yet I had to endure it and act as if nothing was happening. I didn't want anyone at school to find out what had happened, let alone what was going on. When I got home, I waited for my husband with dinner ready. He had adopted the habit of kissing my belly when he arrived and then kissing me. He looked very happy, and the guilt hit me like a truck speeding towards me. I pretended that everything was fine and just as happy as he was. The truth was that I felt so guilty that this feeling had overshadowed my happiness for the life that was growing inside me. Still, I knew it was what I had always wanted, so I tried to be as happy as I could. I would never give up my habit of getting to work early. I couldn't help it. Had to be that way. That way, if I had to correct exams or prepare for some class, I could do it during that time. I was also the last one to leave school. My coworkers came to think I had some kind of workaholic. I came to think that I had some kind of workaholic, which I thought was not true. One morning, I was talking to one of my coworkers outside of school when I saw a very luxurious car arrive. I'd never seen it before, so I was impressed that this car came to our school. I frowned in amazement and looked at my coworker. She just shrugged her shoulders and said, "He's the son of a very important real estate entrepreneur, very handsome, too." At that point, she sighed and stared at the car that was parking just then. I was not prepared for what I saw next. I would have never imagined that the person who got out of the Audi car that had just arrived was none other than Antonio. My impression was such that my partner felt it was necessary to ask me what was wrong with me. I opened my eyes wide to make sure it was really Antonio getting out of the expensive car. When he saw me, he let me see his mischievous smile. I could not hide the impression I was feeling at that moment. I had no idea that this boy was a millionaire. Why didn't I know? I felt that I should have found out at some point. After all, we had shared some time together. He never mentioned it, and now that I thought about it, I never bothered to know much more about him. We had never been in his car. He had always moved around in my car. I put my hands to my face and I hid it. I was in shock. My son's father was a much younger man than than me, whose father was a well-known millionaire throughout the city. This was completely unexpected. As Antonio passed by, he had done it very close to me. He was doing it on purpose. I could smell his perfume, and his attractive face was smiling suggestively at me. I felt in trouble. The attraction was undeniable. I constantly wondered how I was able to resist such a virile, handsome man. I like to think that my willpower and unshakable at that time. At least that was what I kept telling myself in the hope that I would not be weak and fall into temptation, surrendering to his muscular arms. I was still with my coworker outside of school as the class I had would not yet begin, and she saw me. She looked very confused. "Are you sure you're okay? Does it hurt or something? Because if you are, you should go to the doctor immediately," for the reason that she was pointing at my belly, and I interrupted her. How could I explain to her what was wrong with me? Impossible. "I'm fine, don't worry. We should go in now," I said, looking at the clock on my phone. My classmate looked at me, still confused, but she agreed to come into the school where a long day's work awaited us. I was not unimpressed by what had seen, and to top it off, the class I had right away was the one where Antonio was. During the 2 academic hours that the class lasted, it didn't stop eating me up with its eyes. He looked everywhere I moved, staring at my breast, at my butt, because I could feel his gaze following me endlessly. I was very nervous and distressed. I wasn't entirely sure why. What difference did it make that this boy was a millionaire? Why did I care about that? To tell you the truth, I couldn't stop seeing him either. His beautiful face attracted me like insects in bright light. His muscular body could be seen through even loose clothing. Every time I caught myself looking at him, he would arch an eyebrow and shake his head while smiling openly. It made my hair stand on end, and I couldn't deny that it's turned me on a little. I sat behind my desk, ready not to see him again for the duration of the class. The obvious attraction I felt for Antonio was real torture for me. Not content with that, he lagged after the class, looking me in the eye, and then to the belly that was beginning to show. He handed me a small package, which he had taken out of his backpack. I had no idea what was in that package, but I tried to return it to him. He said, "Just accept it. I'd feel like a fool if you didn't accept it. I bought it for you. Accept it. You look very beautiful today." And he left, leaving that package in my hand and leaving me puzzled. I hadn't been able to refuse it, especially when he looked at me like that. His voice was gallant, soft, making me feel like I didn't want to feel. I had to emphasize that it felt like torture to me. I could not accept any more gifts, nor could I be alone with him after school. Mostly, I would have to avoid that. I was afraid that I would not be able to resist his gaze, his smell for much longer. Uh, Vincy, you're cray cray. It was hard not to imagine. It was hard not to imagine his strong arms around me, making me feel his vulnerable, defenseless, letting myself be carried away by the pleasure I knew so well that he could provide. I evoked that image of his naked body, his spectacular hard cock between my fingers, ready to be carried to my mouth. I opened my eyes and shook my head. From that moment on, I was forbidden to fantasize about him anymore. When I came back to reality, I remembered that little package and opened it. It was a beautiful necklace that must have cost a fortune. I had never seen such beautiful jewelry up close. I tried it on and returned it to the wrapping where it had come from. I laid my head on my desk, overwhelmed. How could I resist? At home, I was forced to put my gift away very well. I couldn't risk my husband seeing it. Before putting it away, I took one last look at it. I wanted to wear it to a fancy dinner in the company of Antonio, which I knew would never happen. I sighed and kept the necklace out of sight. Why had Antonio bothered to give me such an expensive gift? I wasn't sure if they were ideas that one existed in my head, but something I thought he suspected the truth. Every time his eyes were fixed on my belly, his expression changed completely and became softer. It was something I could very well be imagining and nothing more. I could not bring the truth out. My husband was not to know. Everyone at school believed the baby was his and things should continue that way. The months went by one after another at a speed that was abnormal for me. My belly was getting bigger and bigger. With that my nervousness as a first-time mother. My husband had bought everything he needed and then some. His excitement was seeping into every corner of the house, and so was my fault. In those months, Antonio had undertaken an arduous task to conquer me. To do so, he used any strategy, from expensive gifts to notes left on my desk with messages like, "I want to kiss you, caress you. You will want to come back again and again. Take me by the hand and accompany me to the indescribable place you once were." My chest would swell with these notes. My chest would swell with these notes after making sure no one was watching me, of course. My hands were shaking as I held the note, and I couldn't help but get a little excited. I had to be honest with myself. I wanted to return to his arms too. I wanted to, but the guilt I normally felt would increase unsuspected levels if I gave in and gave myself to him once more. Almost daily, I found on my desk jewelry, very expensive clothes, and all kinds of things that only wealthy people can afford. At home, I already had a hiding place filled with the gifts Antonio gave me. He did all kinds of things to get my attention. He would crouch in the corridors near the teacher's room to wait for me and stumble, though softly with me, and thus say very erotic and sensual things in my ear. He would take me in his two hands and whisper to me, rubbing his lips on my neck in the process. I did not know what to do. On one hand, I wished that his hands would walk all over my body, and on the other hand, I had to be strong and push him away, leaving him smiling, disappointed. But at the same time, in his eyes, I could see that I felt hope that something would resurface between us. I was already 8 months pregnant, and I was in an empty room grading tests as I always used to do. I had been visiting the bathroom very often. It was inevitable. I stopped what I was doing and went to the bathroom, and I felt footsteps approaching. I turned my head, and it was Antonio, who was following me very closely. I suspected that he already knew that I was still in school, and he stayed to continue trying to conquer me. I rushed into the bathroom. However, he was quicker, and he grabbed me firmly by holding me against the wall. The door to the bathroom was just a few inches away. On that occasion, I could not take my eyes off his beautiful wolf's eyes. One, he only saw me. He didn't utter a word, and he kissed me ardently, sticking more of his body to mine so that I felt his cock brushing against my leg. My belly didn't allow him to come closer as he wanted. He turned me around and we went into the bathroom with him glued to my back, kissing her and my neck, surrounding me with his arms. His hands had stomped on my huge breast, and he was squeezing them a little. My mind was struggling. I was undecided. I didn't know whether to run away or to let myself be carried away by what was happening. I was about to give up. I was so excited. My crotch was on fire. I was sure he was in the same situation, judging by how he felt bumping into my buttocks. He led me to a cubicle without stopping kissing me. I turned my head to kiss him. He stuck out his tongue and rubbed it with mine, which made me even more excited. He pushed me against the toilet, but I had another idea. I sat down on the toilet seat and bit his dick over his pants gently. His dick was hard as a rock. I unzipped him while he stroked my hair and finally pulled out his dick. I ran my tongue down the trunk while both hands I lifted with both hands I lifted his flannel and caressed his well sculpted abs. Man, if I'd have sat on that toilet like that, I'd have peed all over myself. Cause trust me, I mean I've never been pregnant, but I got a bladder that's about the size of a walnut, and when I gotta go, I gotta go. And I understand that's kind of the way your bladder is when you're pregnant too. I ran my tongue down the trunk with both hands. I lifted his flannel and caressed his well sculpted abs. He took one of my hands and put it in his mouth, sucking my fingers. I went down to his balls, which I put in my mouth at the same time. He put a hand behind my head and urged me to put it completely in my mouth, which I did by moving my head back and forth, but not for long. Even though his cock was so delicious, neither of us could stand such excitement anymore. I had to pass, so I got up and he turned me around with one hand. He approached my ear. His voice sounded choppy, and he said, "I'll do it from behind. I'm afraid to do something to the baby." Even though I told him it was safe, he pointed his dick at my ass and sank his dick there, not before running his saliva filled fingers up my ass. I leaned against the wall with both hands, and he began to slowly lunge at me, kissing and squeezing my breasts from behind, then pulling them out and rubbing my nipples. I was moaning quietly, afraid that someone might hear us. I couldn't take any chances, even though that was a big one. He lifted my hips even higher and fucked me very hard. We both sweated profusely, and his sweat fell on my back as it penetrated my ass with vehemence. Ve- Vehemence. His hips were hitting my buttocks, making so much noise that I had to ask him to stop, but he did not listen to me. He continued to penetrate me strongly, no matter what. I also let myself go and started moaning very loudly while his onslaughts increased intensity and speed, holding my hair for support. We were making a lot of noise, but we had both been looking forward to that moment for a long time. We couldn't stop. I was turning my head to look at his face. He was fucking me like never before while he was rubbing my clitoris. A very intense pleasure invaded me, and I knew what would happen. It came inside my ass. Meanwhile, I also had a violent orgasm that almost made me collapse on the toilet. We left there cautiously. Antonio seemed happy, but I left school first, heading straight for my car and went home feeling guilty, but this time it was definitely worth it. The next day, my water broke while I was at home with my husband. I felt very scared. It wasn't time yet. I was going to say, damn, that was quick. Why did my water break? My husband was trying to calm me down, and we went to the hospital right away. I rushed to the hospital more scared than ever, almost in a panic. My husband was very frightened, but he helped me control my fear. Neither of us was sure what was happening. A lot of time passed in which I didn't know what had happened, what would become of my baby, but he was finally born. He was a beautiful baby. When I held him in my arms, I saw that he looked very much like his father. His eyes were like those of a wolf. I knew that someone could tell he didn't look like my husband, but at that moment, I didn't care too much. I already had my baby in my arms, and that was all I cared about. The baby I had always looked forward to so much. What I still didn't know was that at that very moment, Antonio had had an accident in his expensive car. And you know what? That's the end. See? Ah! So you're going to have to go get the book to find out what happens next. Oh, I will tell you the name of the baby, Bruno. But that's all you're getting. I'm not reading anymore because it's too long. And you need to go read it yourself. Miss Shirley. I love you, Miss Shirley. You're so awesome. You are just so awesome. Well, damn, there's voices on the next chapter, but dang, there's a lot of reading too. Yeah, there's no way I would. Yeah, there's no way I would finish in time. So yeah, you're done. I'm done. That was kind of cute, wasn't it? Alrighty, so tomorrow night we have Mr. Michael James in book number 3, Mr. March. Remember, that's the ones we're doing the grandmother auction where she auctioned her granddaughter out. So we're reading one book a month. So tomorrow night will be Michael James. And we always love it when Michael's in the house. Whoop, whoop. Hey, Vincy, remind me to text Michael tomorrow, see if he's going to be here. Love you, Neener. You're not getting any more. Alrighty. Oh, my neck's tired. There must be a front coming through because my body hurts. I got a physical in the morning. Not a girly physical, just a full body physical. Doing EKG and blood work and blah, blah, just my annual physical. So, yeah. And I may have company tomorrow. I'm supposed to start babysitting or dog sitting my grandniece or my niece, my dog niece, I guess. It's not a grand dog, although I could call her a grand dog. She's about 10 years old. She's English bulldog. And she'll be in here with me. Yep. In my purple hair. My purple hair. All righty. You guys have a wonderful evening. You got 10 minutes. Fake it if you don't want to go in there where the children are at. Or go to bed early like I probably do. Whatever. Or go watch the rest of the show. So, all right. You guys have a great evening, and I will talk to you tomorrow. Happy reading.